Is this working? It is. Excellent. Just a big thank you to the MadFest scheduling people who put Shall We Take Agencies in-house just as before we present. That's super helpful. We're standing in between you and lunch, I suspect, so we'll try and be pretty quick and we'll try and be as entertaining as possible. Well, Nikola will try and be entertaining. But we'll start with a show of hands, actually. Has anyone here ever played Linky? Okay, quite a few. Not quite as many as I hope. We might have to change to a sort of Monopoly metaphor. But Linky's a really simple game. It's about understanding the answers and then connecting the dots between those answers. Why am I talking about Linky? Effectively, Linky is about connecting the dots. It's about spotting new patterns where people haven't seen them before, and it's about connecting the firm to the flexible. And that's really what we want to talk to you today about. Talk to you about how 1664 Blanc really did this, defied convention and created this kind of elegant revolution within beer. And it really kind of underlines the power of connecting the dots. I'm Jamie Holtum. I head up the team at Haines and McGregor, and this is Nikola Maravic, Global Brand Director of 1664 Blanc.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here in this epicenter of creativity and my favorite city in the world.
And yeah, this is a story all about connecting the dots. And why are we talking about this? I guess connecting the dots is a super simple concept, but it's not done enough. And it's probably not done as clearly as we need to do it across the industry. What it is really is about understanding what you have. It's understanding what's going on around you. So what's new, what's going on in culture, what's going on with the consumer, what's going on in the category, and then linking that to what you have. So really linking your brand equity, understanding your brand vision, all of that great stuff, but understanding the world around you as well. And it's a really important thing. And Nikola and I and a bunch of people who are here sat down 5-6 years ago, and now I'm not quite sure it was, and we worked out what we had, and we didn't have a huge amount, did we?
Yeah, I remember we were sitting, I think it was in London. This is all the great things start in London, right? We were sitting with the blue bottle, with a beer, wheat beer, with a citrus twist, and this tenuous link to Paris, which the brand was inspired by, right? That was the beginning.
It's pretty much all we had, that's right. But there were other dots going on. So thinking from a category perspective, so you look at the data in 2019, 2020, we sort of reached peak craft. So you're seeing a lot of beer drinkers moving away from the world of craft and actually back to easy drinking lagers. So think Estrella, think the rise of Stella again, think Birra Moretti, think more recently something like Madri, which are these kind of provenance-driven, easy drinking lagers. We were seeing that shift happen, and we thought, okay, with the idea around Paris, that could be really interesting for us. So another dot sort of emerged. But from a consumer perspective, what was going on there?
We're becoming increasingly more and more aware of this shift in consumers' drinking behaviors. I think they were drinking less but better, and we're shifting their attention to premium categories like sparkling wines and cocktails, right? And at the same time, we were looking and we were seeing how luxury and premium brands like Veuve Clicquot, Moet, or Vuitton were actually challenging the norms of the category. We're stepping into this space more boldly. We're bringing in new codes, right? And bringing a much-needed breath of fresh air into what was, at that point of time, a little bit like a stuffy premium space, right? So that was another big revolution, another big change that we were witnessing at the time.
That's right. And that idea of bringing something new and different into something that's quite stuffy, again, another dot which was really interesting. And then actually from a cultural perspective, well, Paris has always been cool, and it's got this sort of emblem of effortless coolness. And it was just really getting cooler at the time. You cast your mind back 4 or 5 years ago, Call My Agent was pretty big all over Netflix, Emily in Paris, things like that. I think the FT did a big study that showed Paris as the most desirable city to live in the world. So Paris was just getting this emblem of coolness and sophistication and elegance, and particularly globally as well. It became this badge for elegance, which again was really, really important to us. So we had all these dots kind of swirling around, right? We had what was going on in the category, consumer, culture, some commercial stuff going on, and we had to find the link, ultimately. We had to connect the dots, and we did.
Absolutely. So if you have Paris, obviously, you have this elegance. You also have audacity, which French are known for worldwide, right? If you have a beer, you still need to be accessible and a little bit playful, not too serious, right? And if you want to take on sparkling wines and cocktails, you really need to be in that premium space and to behave correctly, right? So that's a big task that you have in that kind of spectrum, right?
That's right. Just before we go on, actually, we just want to take a kind of sidestep, I guess, more about the development of this idea. At Haines, we take clarity really, really seriously. And I've got a great quote here by Barack Obama, which we kind of often reference at Haines and McGregor, and maybe it's useful to talk about him the day before the election. Despite your political leanings, he definitely knew how to build a brand. And the quote is this. It's not his most inspirational quote, but that's kind of the point. He said, "I like writing things out longhand. I find that a computer gives even my roughest drafts too smooth a gloss and lends half-baked thoughts the mask of tidiness." How often do we do that? How often do we do that as great, creatives and strategists and planners? Do we use some brilliant copy or maybe a great alliteration or great visuals just to mask some ambiguity or mask a kind of sense of completeness of the idea? I guess the point is, when you're brand building, is do you really understand the idea completely fully? Does the person next to you really understand it? Can you go and explain it to someone outside the room, outside the industry? And I guess it's just something to really kind of run home or ram home, is the idea of a tight proposition, because your consumer insight needs to link tightly to the category insight, obviously to your RTBs and your positioning and stuff like that. And if it doesn't, if there's one that is slightly loose, well, that actually starts to unravel. Great agencies will get amongst the work and pull it apart, as they should. And if it doesn't quite fit all together, it'll start to unravel. So it's something we take really seriously. And actually, what you see in this proposition is the clarity and tightness of it is a huge reason for its success. And actually, to echo that point, we then, with Nikola, built out these super, super tight guardrails, really leaning into that point Nikola made about playful elegance. What playful elegance is, what is it not, where can it go, where shouldn't it go, all that great stuff. So something that we then used across the business to really make sure people were super clear what the brand was and wasn't, was very fundamental to it. So back to the story, we had this idea of playful elegance, a kind of beautiful tension between that accessibility and joy that you talked about with something a little bit more sophisticated. And we started to push the needle in terms of what we could do to the beer category, taking it to new places, taking it to places it hasn't been before, ultimately, which is what we wanted to do. And it was a really, really important time to do that. The beer category was opening up in what is a category often about men, about sport, about food. We wanted to take it somewhere different. We wanted to go fashion, design, art, not words, not areas normally associated with the beer category, but we managed to do just that.
And for us, honestly, it was never a question whether we should collaborate with fashion houses, with artists and designers, whether or not, right? The question was how, when, and where. And over the last 5-6 years, we've done some major, incredible collaborations, showcasing playful elegance, showcasing good taste with a twist. Again, twist is a really important element because that's what differentiates us in the world of beer. And I also believe that these activation pillars that we use, especially fashion, are differentiating us significantly in a very busy world of international premium beer brands, right? We've also collaborated with a number of exciting designers and artists around the world, like some of them like Maison Kitsune, Aaron Ash, and Soland as well. And we are soon to announce the next big global collaboration for 1664.
Yeah, the London Fashion Week stuff was incredible, and it really put the beer brand, the Blanc brand, in a place where no beer brand had gone before, which is kind of, again, all the clarity that we did allowed it to do that. I guess it's easy, isn't it, to stand up here and talk about cool activations and, you know, great collabs and everything. But the fundamental thing is, did it drive growth and did it drive the bottom line?
Yeah, I mean, before we go there, like London Fashion Week was a particular highlight earlier this year, I have to say, and that was supported by listing in Selfridges, but also, among others, fashion weeks in Copenhagen, Toronto, Montreal, and Paris. This is where the brand is showcased in a beautiful and very, very distinctive way. Going back to growth, right? I mean, this brand is relatively young, but so far, UK is our 52nd market we launched in earlier this year, and we have very strong presence across Europe and Asia. It's one of the biggest profit contributors to the group amongst more than 300 beer brands, right? And we keep growing. I mean, there is no sign of slowing down for 1664 Blanc. We still have few markets to launch, and it's a big, big success story. And it's not only growth, it's also incremental growth. A fascinating point from the UK market is that 70% is incremental to the beer category. And this brand also brings in disproportionately more female consumers than any other beer brand.
The last two dots we just want to talk about is one about the internal brand. And I guess the talk before us was actually very insightful about this, about internal brand building. It does get talked about a lot, but actually, I guess, does it really get the emphasis it needs? You know, can you position your brand and the campaign or the idea as a way to kind of deliver the senior priorities in the business? Can you connect insight to sales, to marketing, to innovation? Can you connect the activation teams to what's going on globally? Can you connect global agencies to local markets? Really just try and work out internally how you can make people feel it and get excited about it and position it as a brand of growth within the business, as well as connecting the dots externally. So connecting the dots is a theme clearly externally, culture, consumer, brand, but it's also pretty fundamental to do internally. You know Carlsberg Group better than anyone. Do you just want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that, about the power of that and what it did?
I mean, this dot is incredibly important, and all people working in large system will agree with me, I'm sure. Carlsberg is another big system, right, with lots of moving parts. But as everyone here will probably know, is you might have the best and the strongest idea in the world, but if you don't have the right people on the journey with you, you don't have much at all, right? And I think this is where internal alignment, internal cell engagement with different teams within the organization becomes incredibly important for your future success and for propelling the brand forward. It starts with markets, obviously. I work in a central role, so I spend a lot of time aligning with markets, inspiring them, showing them the value and the potential of 1664 Blanc around the world, right? You also must not forget about sales teams, because they are the ones who will energize the trade. And last but not the least, your senior stakeholders, because they are the ones who will unlock budgets and investment. So it's really about identifying these different internal audiences, what they want to and what they need to hear, and telling that story consistently together with your agencies who are supporting you on that journey. And I've been very, very fortunate with Haines and with other agencies on this journey over the last 5 years.
And it's a good kind of segue to talk about some of the other agencies, but also going back to the tightness of the proposition, playful elegance, what does it really mean? What's the vision of the brand? Those kind of, people talk about creative constraints, or operating within the constraints really allows for great creativity. The freedom of a tight brief, again, is a really useful phrase. And it would be remiss of us to stand up here and not shout out some of the brilliant agencies that have done so much of this fantastic work. So Fold 7, Design Bridge, Full Fat, Live and Breathe, and actually so many other agencies across the local markets who have done such a brilliant job from executional level. But a huge part of it is to, the clarity that the team has built around what the proposition is, the direction of the brand. It's simple stuff, but it's really not easy to do. And it's really getting to the nub and the kernel of exactly what you're trying to do allows these guys to do the brilliant creativity within the constraints. And then just the last point we want to talk about is innovation, just very briefly. So innovation needs to do a couple of things. It needs to drive commercial growth, but it can also be a great lever to pull to drive brand equity. And this is exactly what it needed to do for Blanc. And actually, again, it's going to sound like a broken record, but the tightness of the proposition, the tightness of the vision allowed innovation actually to become relatively obvious. If you want to bring in a degree of playful elegance to a beer category, what categories do you lean on? Where do you go? What direction do you go in? And actually it did become relatively obvious where we should go.
Indeed, as our brand strategy and innovation partners, Haines have helped us develop a very unique, I would say, and playfully elegant, and what I like to say, audacious innovation pipeline with some incredible brews that we launched in the last few years. And if you go back to that tight positioning, which we defined earlier in this conversation, you won't be surprised that we have launched some of these brews, right? Starting with 1664 Prestige, our super premium, or call it like uber premium, as some would say, proposition, which is brewed with champagne yeast for an effervescent and super premium serve. We also have 1664 Brut in Asia, which is inspired by the world of French wine and Brut concept in general. And last but not the least is 1664 Rosé, a more fruity variant, which was turned into this beautiful blush serve inspired Parisian Rosé, and which was already knocking in many markets. So a very, very successful variant in 1664 brand house.
Yeah, and they're doing, you know, that point about incrementality, particularly in the UK, 70% incremental in the UK is just an astonishing statistic, and it's a great sell-in, and these are kind of driving that sense of incrementality, which is brilliant. So that's pretty much all we've got time for. Just a couple of big takeouts as summary, which I find always helpful. One is that point around linky and connecting the dots, right? Start to see this industry as a way to connect the dots between everything you have. Don't leave a stone unturned. Really try and connect the dots between everything you have. The second point is clarity. Really trying to get that sense of clarity on the proposition. Think of that quote from Barack Obama. It's genuinely really, really helpful. Really, really unpick what you've got. And the third point, which doesn't often get talked about very often, and we haven't really talked about it here, is consistency. And it's not consistency of creative, but it's almost a manifestation of this, but actually consistency of personnel. So Nikola has been the global brand director of 1664 Blanc for 5 years, and he's built a team that really understands the vision. And we haven't had a new director come in and rip up the rulebook and say, here's a new vision, here's some new packaging, here's a new direction. The clarity and the consistency that's been built over time has been so useful. So that point around consistency of personnel is a kind of underlying factor which maybe actually have more impact on great brand building, great brand growth than perhaps gets talked about. But thank you very much. I don't know if you want to finish.
Yeah, I would just add that the power of repetition, obviously, when you work with a big system, with big portfolios, right? And especially if you work in a central role, don't forget that the system consists of lots of moving parts, and it takes time for people to get the message. So the power of repetition is amazing. Make sure you remain freshly consistent with your assets, but the story needs to be told many times. Just like when we were children, like we read fairy tales many times. So I think that's one of the elements of our success formula so far. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
A huge thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, what definitely came out for me was that consistency, both in terms of the storytelling, the personality, but also your executions. One question I had, because we have a couple minutes, is you talked about having to bring the local markets along with you, but also that power of consistency. So when did you get them involved in the journey? Was it throughout, or was it when you had a pretty good idea of where you were going?
Well, obviously there is a certain cycle, planning cycle throughout the year where you actually engage with markets, you tell the story. You need to bring a lot of data into discussion because we as marketeers tend to be very subjective. So I think data also helps to basically explain why we believe that something that is right for the brand needs to be done in a certain way. And then making sure that you really meet people. You go, I travel a lot during the year. I meet brand champions around the world. We have this discussion. And I also stay very close. The entire team stays very close to what markets are doing locally. And we have certain creative councils where we review local projects. We even fund them if we find them exciting for further rollout, right? So it's this constant engagement and dialogue and being really direct. And sometimes, you know, it's not looking as good as we want, and we need to be open about that, right? But then what I really want to highlight is if they're doing good things, then we are praising them and we are really celebrating success. I think that's incredibly important.
Incredible. I also love beer and champagne, so I'm really excited for the prestige product. I don't know about anyone else. Thank you so, so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.